Welcome back to JGIE Connect. We are conducting revision classes on modern interface design. So far we have been discussing about the user interface design process. Today we shall look into the interface design goals. So the use of a screen or a web page is always affected by many factors. These factors may include like how much information is presented to the end user or how exactly the information is organized in the interface and what type of language is used to communicate with the end user and how distinctly the components are being displayed on the screen and how consistent a screen or a page is with the other screens or pages. So in our previous discussion we have found that there are several reasons which discourage the user from using an interface. So some reasons here that could discourage a user are or maybe like unclear captions or badly worded sentences or improper typefaces or graphics emphasis, sometimes misleading headlines, and sometimes the interface could be asking for or requesting for irrelevant or unnecessary informations. So, and sometimes the interface itself might be cluttered or cramped, and poor qualities of presentations, appearance, and improper arrangements in the interface may make the user run away from the interface. So, the most common problems in visual interface design are like visual inconsistencies and overuse of three-dimensional presentations and overuse of too many bright colors, and sometimes the interface may also include poorly designed icons and a bad typography. So, all in all, these kinds of problems can lead screens that are confusing, disorganized, distracting, and just plain ugly. So, web pages therefore prevent the user from using the interface. So, what exactly does a user want from an interface? So, what are people looking for in the design of the screens? So, basically, people would be looking for a orderly, clean, clutter-free appearance and an obvious indication of what is being shown and what should be done with the basic interface, and they should be they should be clear about what information is located in which part of the screen and a clear indication of what relates to what, including options, headings, and captions, and data should clearly be indicated. And then the interface designed must include plain simple English language to communicate with the end users. And always there should be simple ways of finding out what is in the system and how to get it out. And there should be a clear indication of when an action may make a permanent change to the system or to the data. So the desired direction is towards keeping the interface very simple, clear, and understandable. So qualities lacking in many of today's these are all the qualities that are these are all the qualities that many of today's screens and web pages are lacking in. So therefore we now move on to discussing what are the principles of a good design, right? In order to make an interface easy and pleasant to use, the goal in the goal in the design should basically focus on reducing the visual work of the end user, and it should also try to reduce the intellectual work that is to be carried out by the end user, and it should basically reduce the memory load on the end user, and it should reduce the motor skills that are required by the end user to use the interface, and it should almost try to minimize or clearly eliminate any burdens or instructions imposed by the technology. That is, the user need not have to be aware of both the hardware and the software support that is needed by the interface. He should be free from the burdens of knowing the details about the hardware and the software requirements of the interface. So the result will always, in case if all these things have been properly taken care of, then the result will always be improved user productivity and the increased satisfaction. So now let us review these principles of good design one by one. So the very first one is the test for a good design. So a simple test for a good design does exist. A screen that passes this test will will be obstacle free and would be very effective. So therefore, we are supposed to check if all screens and web page elements can be identified just by looking at it, or the end user just gets a clue out of it by having a look at the screen rather than trying to read the words that make up the content of the screen. So therefore, the pictures, the captions, the texts are to be placed very carefully on the screen. And similarly, the screen and web page meaning and purpose must be clearly be defined. So all interface elements must have meaning to the user and serve a purpose in performing a particular task. If an element does not have meaning for the user, then see to that you do not include it in the interface, because such an element is now to be considered as a noise. So therefore, it means that each and every element and control or maybe a text must properly be organized on the screen, and you should basically emphasize on the color and every graphics as well as the screen animation when you design a good interface, right? So all forms of feedbacks messages must have proper meaning to the user and must serve a purpose in performing his task. And similarly, a good screen design must also organize the elements clearly and meaningfully. So visual clarity is basically achieved when the display elements are organized and presented in some meaningful, understandable and recognizable way. So, a clear and clean organization makes it easier to recognize the screen's essential elements and to ignore its secondary information which is not appropriate to the end user. So, clarity is influenced by several factors like consistency in the design, the visual pleasing composition in the design, logical or the sequential ordering of the elements in the screen, the presentation of proper amounts of the information in the screen, and sometimes proper groupings and proper alignments of screen elements, etc. So, what must be avoided here is the visual clutter that is created by indistinct elements and randomly placed elements as well as the confusing patterns. So, what do we mean by consistency? Offering consistency, right? So, quite simply, is consistency is going to reduce the task completion times, and it is going to increase the user satisfaction because it greatly aids in learning. It, it establishes expectations, permits a person to employ his conceptual learning and transfer training, and enables the user to easily anticipate the location of screen elements of his interest, right? So basically we try to provide real world consistency which reflects which is going to reflect which is reflected by the person's experience, his expectations, work conventions, and cultural conventions. So, therefore, all applications or website screens must include visual identity, theme, components, and all its components must be organized, must be presentable, usable, and must follow same conventions and rules across all related interfaces. So it also becomes very necessary that you try to deviate only when there is a clear benefit for the end user. So in designing a website, consistency greatly enhances visual scanning and a frequent user activity, right? So it also fosters a sense of place, reassuring a person that he or she is rooted in a certain location. So this provides stability and reduces the navigation confusion, right? So similarly, starting point. So we are supposed to provide an obvious starting point in the screen right at the upper left corner. So we try to focus the user attention on the most important parts of the screen or the page. So therefore a screen should be designed such that when a person scans an array of information, it should be dependent upon the composition of the display, right? So whatever is very important must appear right at the beginning of the page, and whichever is the information that requires lesser attention can be left at the bottom of the web page. And always see to that the web pages are not too very lengthier, right? So in conclusion, provide an obvious starting point right in the upper left corner of the screen, and because this is near the location where visual scanning begins and will permit a left to right and top to bottom reading of information, as is common in Western cultures. And for information with no obvious or prescribed flow, focus the user's attention on most important components of the information that is being displayed on the screen. So, similarly, also try to give some concentration on ordering of data and content. So it means that the information on the screen must be divided into units of logical, meaningful, and sensible units. So we try to and always try to organize these information units by the degree of their interrelationships between the data or the information, and then provide proper ordering of screen units of information and elements that are prioritized according to the user's expectations or his needs. So, possible ordering schemes include conventional ordering or ordering by the sequence of use, ordering by the frequency of use, or ordering based upon the functions offered or based upon the importance, and maybe something general to specific, right from general to specific piece of information. So ensure that information that must be compared is visible at the same time. So, two different parts of the information to be compared must be visible on the same screen. And ensure that only information related to user's tasks or needs are being presented to him on the screen, right? So we said that the information can be ordered in several different schemes, right? So the very first scheme is conventional ordering. So through convention and custom, some ordering schemes have evolved for certain elements. For example, uh, by days of week, by months of year, or by one's name and address, and so on. So these elements should always be ordered in the customary way. So sometimes information has to be ordered based upon the sequence of use, right? So sequence of use grouping involves arranging information items in the order in which they are commonly received or transmitted, or in natural groups. For example, consider an address. This is normally given by the street, city, state, zip code, right? So there is a sequence in which you present an address. So depending upon the frequency of use, so this frequency of use is a design technique based on the principle that the information items used most frequently should be grouped at the very beginning, and the second most frequently used item must be grouped next, and so forth, right? So depending upon the function or category, information items can be grouped according to their purpose, right? All items pertaining to, for example, pertaining to insurance coverage may be placed in one location, and the informations pertaining to transportation vehicles must be grouped in another another location on the screen, right? So depending upon importance grouping is basically based on the information's importance and the user's task or needs. So important items can be placed first or in most prominent positions, and the items be organized from best to worst or largest to smallest. And general to specific arrangement says that if some data is more general than others, then the general elements must precede the specific elements. This will usually occur when there exists a hierarchical relationship among the data elements. So this sort of hierarchical relationship you can usually find it in website organization schemes, right? So ordering normally reflects a combination of all these techniques.